had to use that someone said from Raiders of the Lost Ark because I don't want to say the Nazis said, what are we going to talk about? Even though that's who he is. All right. All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. Welcome back, Bob. I know Bob and I, it seems like it's been forever since we talked because we had Mardi Gras and then last week you had the school stuff. So, you know, it feels like it's been a month and it hasn't been. And of course, I teased the show with one of my favorite movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, all remember the scene of the guy in the black leather who shows up in Tunisia. No, it's not. Is it Egypt? Yeah, it's Egypt. It was filmed in Tunisia. It was supposed to be Egypt, but when he sits in front of Karen Allen's character Marion and the French archaeologist, a bad guy, and he says, "Now, what are we going to talk about?" And he's so creepy. I just love that scene because he's such a perfect Nazi villain. So anyway, yes, welcome to NOLA, Derek Carr. The deal happened, and I thought it was funny. Here Sunday, the news comes out that the Jets he was leaning towards the Jets. It was kind of his, you know, he thinks he wants to go that way. And, you know, and I read it immediately. I'm like, he's looking for more money. He's trying to squeeze more money. And it's just, yes, thank you. Yes, the lost city of Tanis outside of Cairo. Yes. How could I forget that?
Yeah.
But,
sorry. You want ice cream?
Yeah, that's fine. We're all supposed to have given up ice cream for Lent, and I get faces in going, do you want some ice cream? I'm like, yeah, I'll take some ice cream. It's you can't have it.
Man, you can't bust up your Lent
anyway.
on a live broadcast. You got to at least wait, you know, shovel it in before or put it in after.
Look, I tell the same joke every year for Lent. Debbie's getting tired of this joke, but I've been telling it for 20 years. I'm going to keep telling it. They ask me all the time, what are you giving up for Lent? I say monogamy. It took you a little while, but yeah. And yeah, usually women go, oh my God, and the guys laugh. So she knows I'm not serious.
I gave up giving up stuff. That's what I did.
Yeah. Give it up as rookers. So let's talk a little bit about Derek Carr's contract and Derek Carr's decision-making process. I really feel like the rest of you guys out there in Saints land, I'm sure Bob, you feel the same way. You know, Derek, it was the Saints had to really screw up to miss on Derek Carr on this one. Mm-hmm. I think this is where he wanted to go. He's familiar with the coach, obviously, because that's who drafted him. This is a good fit for him. He's in a very weak division. A lot of appeal. There's weapons on this team, even though we don't know what's going to happen to Kamara. You know, there's a lot of potential here. Whereas if you go into the AFC, you're in a division with Josh Allen. You're going to be playing against the Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. You know, Joe Burrow. This is a much more appealing division from that standpoint. Plus, you're indoors.
Yeah.
You know, the only outdoor game you really have to play is Tampa and Carolina, but you're playing at least 10 indoor games every year. So So what is your take on this with Carr coming?
First of all, I know a lot of people initially had issues with the money. Um, you have to think about it in different aspects, though. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of money to me. That's more money than I'll ever see. But the reality is, folks, if you break down the yearly average of Carr's contract, and first of all, NFL contracts don't work that way as far as yearly average. But if you break down the yearly average, he's only going to be making a little bit more, a tiny bit more than what players like Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, and Ryan Tannehill did last year. The deal, again, yearly average, is for a little bit more than what Geno Smith just signed. It's less than what Daniel Jones just signed. So my question to you Saints fans is, who would you rather have of these 6 quarterbacks? Ryan Tannehill, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, or Derek Carr? Right. It should have only taken you exactly that long to be able to answer. The fact that Carr's deal included up to $100 million in guaranteed money, that actually does the Saints a favor, because when that happens, when you're talking about a large sum of guaranteed money, you can move stuff around, convert it into signing bonuses, push back, add voidable years. In other words, Derek Carr did the New Orleans Saints a favor with this guaranteed money, a favor towards the salary cap. Why? Because Derek Carr at least proclaimed that he wanted to go to a contender or a team that will be able to contend in a short period of time. He turns 32 at the end of this month, 328 for you Falcons haters. The money that the Saints will be able to save this year alone, because Carr's salary cap hit is going to be pretty close to the veteran minimum for the quarterback position. That's going to open them up once they clear other salary cap space. That's going to open up other options in free agency. So really, you look at it this way. It was where the Saints felt they were as a team. If they felt like they were still fairly close to contending, then you have to go out and get a guy like Derek Carr or Jimmy Garoppolo. I still put the two on pretty even playing field when healthy, because outside of that, your free agent options were, and Alan and you and I covered it a few weeks ago. Your free agent options were people like Baker Mayfield, Marcus Mariota, Sam Darnold, players like that. So in other words, if you had a chance to field a contending team in 2023, you had to get Derek Carr. If you decided to blow the whole thing up and just go for a full-scale rebuild, then you put all your eggs in drafting one with a high draft pick. Obviously, the Saints felt like it was the former and that they still had the talent on this team that with a few pieces they could contend. So since they felt that way, that's why their options, plan A, plan B, and maybe even plan C was Derek Carr and Derek Carr the whole way. Is he an elite quarterback? No, not in my opinion. Is he a quarterback that can get you to the playoffs and win a couple playoff games? Yeah. Is he the type of quarterback that you could win a Super Bowl with? If all other things fall right, if you have a heck of a defense, which New Orleans has the potential to have, if all your weapons on offense, which they still need to add some, if all those weapons on offense, including offensive line, stays healthy, then yeah, I think Derek Carr could win you a championship. He's what I think Matt Stafford meant to the LA Rams last year. I don't consider I've always liked Matthew Stafford. I don't consider Matt Stafford an elite quarterback, a Hall of Fame quarterback, nor do I consider Derek Carr that. But they both have the skills and the talent to win a football game. Unlike what we have seen this team have, the Saints have at the quarterback position each of the last 2 years. That's where I'm at on Derek Carr. So I do like the signing.
I looked at him and I had this contract, and I said a lot of Saints fans put Bobby Hebert as like the 3 quarterback in Saints history. Breeze, obviously number 1. If you're of a certain age, Archie Manning's 2. Some may put Aaron Brooks because of statistics at 2, but Bobby Hebert is always right there at 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Carr is Bobby. Okay. He's not going to win a game by, but part of what made Bobby Hebert as successful as he was with the defense. I think Carr is faster than Bobby Hebert. He's a little more accurate than Bobby Hebert, and the game has changed, obviously. But like position at quarterback that you simply did not have a Andy Dalton and with a Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill or any guy you've had back there. I think you look at what happened with the Saints once Hebert was gone, and this is not a knock on Jim Everett, but the Saints were not as good of a team because they weren't getting the leadership and the confidence in the offense that you were getting with Bobby Hebert in the regular season. So, if he can be a Bobby Hebert type of quarterback, managing, don't screw it up, then in the playoffs, play better than Hebert, play more like an Aaron Brooks and a Drew Brees, you really have something special there. I like the signing because, quite frankly, I didn't like the options if you lost out on Carr. Jimmy Garoppolo was the next best choice in my mind, but Jimmy Garoppolo, you have to realize he's like a Jaguar. You're only going to have him a few weeks, and then the rest of the time he's in the shop because he's broken. It's like that fancy sports car you always wanted to have, but you're always working on it. Other than that, you get a Baker Mayfield, you look at Jacoby Brissett, looking at guys keeping because they're not Andy Dalton, and we were Bryce Dalton is. This is a draft, and a lot of people are mad because they wanted the Saints to have to draft their quarterback. Here's the problem with the lottery ticket. And if you go into the draft looking for a player, like Hendon Hooker is the most popular name I see right now. You're going out there, I've got to go get Hendon Hooker. What happens when someone takes Hendon Hooker in front of you? What do you do then? Are you going to reach for another guy because you have to have a quarterback? Mm-hmm. So you're going to go and get, I don't know, Tanner McNee at 29 or 40, or the kid from BYU, or, the kid from Houston. You're going to be reaching for one of these guys. So I got to get a quarterback because I have nothing. You can't have that attitude. I mean, the Patrick Mahomes story it's a dead horse people beat forever. The Saints were poised to draft him. They had his number on the phone, ready to dial him in when the Chiefs traded up and took him right in front of them. Mm-hmm. That happens. They were on the phone with that linebacker, Reuben Foster, when the 49ers called up, we're taking you. So, I mean, that happens in the draft. I like being in a position where I have my quarterback, and if a quarterback I like falls to me, I'll take him. But I don't have to take him. And that's the difference for me. You don't have to take that guy.
Well, and here's an even worse scenario. I love Hendon Hooker. Don't get me wrong. I think if he goes to the right team, he is going to be a player. But the Saints were sitting with the 29th overall pick in the first round. To move up to get, to me, the top two quarterbacks in the draft are Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. A lot of people are trying to shoehorn Will Levis and or Anthony Richardson, into that top 5, top 7 range also. So, say you feel any one of those 4 quarterbacks are that high of value. Say the Saints feel that way. To move up from 29th overall to that range would cost a fortune in future draft picks. And what if you do that and you miss? It's not like the Arizona Cardinals, Houston Texans, a couple other teams that are perpetually picking in the top 5, where if they pick a quarterback and they miss, oh, well, we're going to be in the top 3, top 5 again next year. We'll just do it all over again. If the Saints would have done that, pulled off a gargantuan trade to move up and get a Bryce Young or one of those guys, and that guy misses, I'll go back to your lottery ticket. It's like spending your last dollar on, do I eat a sandwich or do I buy a lottery ticket? Well, I'm going to buy a lottery ticket because if I hit the lottery, I can eat sandwiches for the rest of my life. I spend that last dollar, lottery ticket doesn't win. Guess what? Don't have another dollar to get a sandwich or a lottery ticket. So that's the kind of position the Saints would have been in. So therefore, I do agree with you. With the Saints getting their quarterback, and you make no mistake, they viewed Derek Carr as their quarterback. That crossed one thing at the top of their team needs list. So now that gives them flexibility in free agency. That gives them flexibility in the draft, which is the more important of the two. So Matt, I think it's hopefully Derek Carr solves the quarterback problem more than just temporarily. The Saints are betting 4 years of their future that it does. That's for sure.
Well, and it gives you the opportunity to build a team around a player, because one of the things I was fighting with too is the tank philosophy. Okay, we're going to tank the season, get rid of all of our good players, have garbage players, and then all we need to do is get in the top 5 or the number 1 overall pick, which you only have one time in its entire franchise history. And we had to go through a 1-15 season to do that. The Katrina year, we were still at number 2. Mora's last year, still at 2. Look at the teams that J.D. Roberts was like 2-11-1. We're at 2, buddy. You're not the number 1 overall pick. So, if Caleb Williams is number 1 quarterback, and we fall, we tank, but we only finish 3rd. What happens then? Now you're talking about trying to trade up to move to that spot. And how do you know Caleb Williams isn't going to be another, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but he's not going to be another, I don't know, Marcus Mariota or, to an extent, Jameis Winston. Because Jameis is not the guy. Or, Rick Meyer.
Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell, Achilles Smith. Any of those guys. I mean, the NFL historical landscape is littered with guys, top 5, top 3 quarterbacks, that were epic failures. And I'm with you. I don't know if I put someone like Jameis Winston in the category of epic failure, but when you draft a guy number 1 overall, you expect him to be the cornerstone of your franchise for at least the next 7 to 10 years. And Jameis Winston certainly wasn't that.
Right. Baker Mayfield, another one, number 1 overall pick. There's so many examples of this happening because the quarterback position, I don't care, pick a draft class. Pick the 1983 draft class. That is the quarterback draft class, because 3 Hall of Famers were in that draft class: Marino, Elway, and Kelly. Okay, all 1983 draft class. You realize 6 quarterbacks were drafted in the first round that year. We all know those 3. Who are the other 3? Todd Blackledge to the Chiefs, Ken O'Brien to the Jets, and Tony Eason to the Patriots. Now, and
to be fair, Eason made a couple of Pro Bowls, went to the Super Bowl. O'Brien led the league in passing for 2 years and went to 3 or 4 Pro Bowls. So those guys were good, but again, not great. And that just proves your point that you could pick any year of draft class. Yeah, even 1983, hands down the best draft year maybe ever overall, but certainly at the quarterback position. And you can still find teams that swung and missed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the Chiefs. A lot of people seem to think that the Chiefs somehow went from. I don't know where they think they came from. Patrick Mahomes, and there was nothing in between. And from the about 71 was the end of their Super Bowl years. The Dolphins beat them in that Christmas playoff game, and that started the Dolphin dynasty, and it really ended the Chiefs. From about 74 to 86, 87 maybe, the Chiefs are really irrelevant. They were an easy win in everybody's check column, okay? And then the U.S. folded. I just forget now. He was the Baltimore Stars general manager.
Peterson.
He gets hired by the Chiefs. Yeah, I just can't think of his first name. It's not Doug, obviously. It's something that I can picture the guy. But anyway, he gets hired and then turn around. Really kicked in overdrive once Marty Schottenheimer got fired from the Browns and he has a sit. You get Joe Montana there. They start going through all the quarterbacks. You can get Derek Thomas and the great teams of the 90s. But yeah, there was a long period though that the Chiefs were irrelevant, and it took them 50 years from winning Super Bowl 4 to winning Super Bowl 54 before they got a trophy again. And people just sort of forget that because they think about them now and how the Bengals were the Bungles for years, decades. It took them 30 years just to win a playoff game. Joe Burrow has already surpassed the franchise win total of playoff games for a quarterback. That's Ken Anderson and Boomer Esiason. So, I mean, it's just I don't think they realize that you don't tank for a year, then the next year come back as the superpower. If you tank for a year, you end up tanking for 4 or 5 years or a decade or more. And that's why I always hated that idea. Because it just doesn't happen that way. The Chiefs already had the pieces in place for a pretty good team, and Patrick Mahomes made them better. The Bengals did get lucky. They got they got Burrow one year. The next year they went back and drafted Jamar Chase, but they kind of had the pieces of defense together for a little while before they really got the key pieces in, and that's the difference. That really is.
Yeah.
Derek Carr's brother David. I think he finally broke Archie Manning's record for most sacks in a career, because he was an expansion team quarterback. But yeah, tanking doesn't work. If it did, the Jets should have 4 or 5 Super Bowls, honestly.
Right. Jets, Lions, Browns would have been a dynasty.
I mean, we've all seen the shirt with all the names of the quarterbacks on the back of the team. The Browns have had since they came back in '98. And we were talking earlier about the Jets. I mean, quarterbacks that I screwed up. I drafted the wrong guy. I'll come and draft somebody in the first round again this year, be my franchise guy. Well, how many times have the Jets have done this since Joe Namath retired? I can think of at least 4 of them off the top of my head. One of them was actually pretty good, Chad Penning.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault he got hurt. But, you start looking at guys like, the guys I got right now, Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, Mark Sanchez. You start looking at these guys that were supposed to be the next superstar quarterback, and how many the Jets currently have the longest streak of not making the playoffs at like 11 years, I think. since I think it was 2010, 13 years. So, yeah, since 2010. Um, I want to ask you this, though. Jimmy Gumbo brought this up. Michael Thomas had a interesting tweet after the news that we signed Derek Carr. And it says, "Thank you, Jesus," and had the fingers
Yeah.
and the prayer thing. How do you read that?
I think that's just Michael Thomas being Michael Thomas. He likes to create waves on Twitter. I'm not going to say he's an attention whore. I wouldn't go that far. He's no Aaron Rodgers or somebody like that. But Michael Thomas treats Twitter like a pond where you throw stones in and see how see the waves go out. I will say this though. I think that Michael Thomas away from leaving the Saints is no longer the certainty that it was even as recently as a week or two ago. I do believe that we could take this away from Thomas's tweet. Jameis Winston wasn't his type of quarterback, wasn't the type of quarterback that he flourishes with. Jameis Winston is a downfield guy. Play action. I'm going to chuck it deep. You run. You run as playground football. You run as far as I can, as far as you can, as fast as you can. I'll get you the football. That's not Michael Thomas's game. Michael Thomas is very precision oriented. In fact, he is, for my money, still the most precise route runner in the game today. He is an intermediate monster. One of those just unstoppable weapons. I mean, even 3 games last year before he went down again, we saw this man can still play. But Jameis Winston is not an intermediate passer. Derek Carr is. Derek Carr, and make no mistake, Derek Carr has the gun to get it down the field. But Derek Carr's game is working through the deep ends, deep middle, and intermediate zones of a defense. That's certainly more tailor fit to Michael Thomas's game than what Jameis Winston brought, than what Taysom Hill brought. Derek Carr is capable of running a very timing-based attack, which, say what you will about Pete Carmichael, when Pete Carmichael's offense is working, that's what kind of passing game it is. So could Michael Thomas be back to the New Orleans Saints? I do think it's possible, but it ain't going to be at $31.7 million in 2023. And folks, that's what it's going to take. Remember that if Michael Thomas is still a New Orleans Saint on March 17th, he is guaranteed $31.7 million this year. So if Michael Thomas is going to be a Saint, he and the team, the New Orleans Saints, have to sit down at the negotiating table and get a reworked deal, done within 10 days. And it would be the type of thing where Thomas is betting on himself to have a big season with a quarterback tailor-made for his abilities on a 1-year contract where he could hit free agency again next year. We have not heard anything about Thomas's representatives or the New Orleans Saints sitting down yet. So if this kind of thing were to happen, it better start to unfold within the next 3, 4, 5 days at the most. So I'm not ruling it out, but at this point, until we see evidence to the contrary, that tweet was just Michael Thomas throwing rocks into the pond to see what kind of waves come out.
You know, and the other thing that's going on, he's been fighting with Nick Underhill a little bit about it. Because Nick Underhill had written, Thomas is on his way out based off of that contract. And Underhill went on his podcast and said, hey, I'll admit when I could be wrong. And, and he had Mike Triplett over there with him, and they were both talking about it. He says, look, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not afraid to admit that. And he says, but the way that contract's written, it doesn't look like he's going to be here, but it could change. And he is saying the same thing you said. He's hearing that there could be something happening, but there has not been that sit-down meeting where Loomis and Thomas's representatives are together discussing a new deal. Yeah, I know it's bad. I don't know why it's bad right now. I know I'm bouncing in and out, and I don't know what's going on. And it seems to be happening a lot right now. Um, but I run my test. My internet is very strong in this room, so I don't know why it does this during the show, but it does. Um, so I rearranged this room is because I was having a lot of problems in that corner over there. So I moved the desk over here, and I'm still having the same problems. And I can see the signal fading in and out. And I don't know why it does it for the broadcast. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to get it better, but it is what it is.
How do you feel about Thomas's tweet? Do you think that there's a little bit of legitimate smoke there, or is that just him being him?
I think there's a little bit of smoke. I don't know how much it is though. I think Thomas wants to stay, honestly. I think he wants to stay and prove himself, prove that he is not this injury prone guy. He likes playing for the Saints. And there's the unknown factor if he goes to another team. But at the same time, I don't know how much the Saints want him back. That deal they structured, because they just restructured that deal. Mm-hmm. That deal was put in place to minimize his cap impact for this year. So it would be awfully funny for them to suddenly restructure the deal again to make it so he could stay a Saint.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel. I'm hoping he stays because we need players on this team. And mm-hmm. Michael Thomas, when he's healthy, is a player. You need him on this team. If not, you're going to have to find yourself a physical possession receiver in this draft because you're not going to get it in free agency. I don't know yet. I'm hoping he does stay because he's one of my favorite players when he's healthy.
Same.
I've raved before about how he attacks the ball, mm-hmm. and he's a monster when you attack. When he's not there, bad things happen. So.
Yeah, and listen, I love Olave and I love Rashid, but if Michael Thomas mm-hmm. stays, that crosses another big need off of the New Orleans Saints needs list this offseason, and that is, as you said, a big physical receiver. And and we saw the wide receivers reset the free agent market last year. So because of that, mm-hmm. I think you can all but rule out a legitimate free agent signing at wide receiver. They would have to turn around and go get it in the draft. And I've seen all kinds of mock drafts having, the Saints grab Zay Flowers, the kid from Boston College, at 29. No, folks, they already have Chris Olave. And they have they already have a Zay in Chris Olave, and Olave is a better one. Zay would not be the kind of prototype receiver that the Saints need right now for this offense. And that is, as Allen said, a big physical monster to take over those intermediate zones. If they go receiver in the draft at any point, and I would expect them to at some point, it's going to be a bigger physical specimen.
I feel that people aren't going to really understand this, but in the Saints offense, you have an X, you have a Y, and you have a slot receiver, a Z. Okay. The X receiver is Michael Thomas. That's your number mm-hmm. one guy. That's the guy you're feeding the ball the most. Your Y is your speed guy. So let's look at it in terms of people who can remember. Marcus Colston was your X. You put Devery Henderson's the Y because that's your speed guy. And say Robert Meacham, Lance Moore, pick your slot guy. That's your slot guy. Okay. Now the Saints move all those pieces around for mismatches. They'll put Devery in the slot and they'll put Marcus Colston in the slot. But I'm just talking about in a basic offense, that's where your guys are. So right now you have nothing at X. If Thomas comes back, that's your X. Then your Y is, this is probably going to upset some people, but your Y really is Rashid Shaheed right now, because of his speed factor. And I like Olave in the slot because I think Olave's got the speed, first off, the threat in the slot. And I also think he has the route running ability. If you're matched up against the third best cornerback, I think he has a good way of getting that open. Too. Like I said, you move them all over the place, okay? But you can flip and put Olave as the Y and Shaheed's the Z. But the basic principle is if I'm going out with a base defense, and that's 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 back, I'm going out with, I want to see Thomas, I want to see Shaheed, and I want to see Olave in the slot because I love those matchups. I can win every one of those matchups. And that's why I think Thomas is so important, because you need a receiver who's a big physical presence who can muscle his way through the team's number 1 quarterback, because that cornerback, and think about Marshawn Lattimore, is matched up always against the X receiver, the top receiver. And that's how you want it to go. So, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. You have to look for that X receiver if you're looking at a receiver in the draft now. And that's not a speed guy. You're looking for a physical guy, a big, strong, somebody who's 6'4" or 6'3" and 212 to 220, and is a route runner. That's the description you're looking for in your draft book. I don't know. John Butler, do you think Deontay Hardy comes back? I don't know. He kind of played himself off this roster last year.
Yeah.
And he really would have to come in on a prove-it deal. And I think he would have to, because he was an undrafted free agent, I'm sure the team feels like I can go find me another one. He right now can be my undrafted free agent kick returner. Although I think Shaheed's a better receiver than Hardy was because of the size difference. I mean, how do you feel?
Yeah, and that's
Hardy?
exactly it. They actually upgraded Deontay Hardy with Rashid Shaheed last year. I don't think Shaheed is nearly as explosive a kick returner as Deontay is, but Rashid had his moments. And we know how explosive he could be in the open field. And I agree with you. Deontay Hardy is an extremely underrated route runner, but he's so limited with his size. And I'm not talking about his height necessarily, but the combination of his size, his height and his weight. He's only listed at 170, and that's listed as, so he ain't 170.
Right.
I think Deontay could absolutely be back with the New Orleans Saints, but it wouldn't be the type of deal where the Saints sign him before free agency. They only do that with guys they prioritize. It wouldn't happen early in free agency. Deontay Hardy is the kind of guy that we saw with Traquan Smith. I think it was 2 years ago or last year, and Willie Snead a couple years before that. You get 2-3 maybe a month, 2-3 weeks, maybe a month into free agency, and Deontay Hardy still isn't signed. It's at that point he might circle around to the Saints and say, "Hey, you guys still interested in me?" And he signs like a quick 1-year prove-it deal, and he comes back as a 4th receiver, and takes kick return duties back over from Shaheed. That'd be the only scenario I see Deontay returning to New Orleans.
Yeah, because I feel like they probably look at him as somebody, he's replaceable. I can go find me another Deontay Hardy in the undrafted free agent market.
Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about his height and say, well, the cheetah with the Dolphins now, he's not that much bigger. Steve Smith, he wasn't that much bigger than Hardy. It's not the height. Steve Smith was built like a fire hydrant. I mean, he was stacked. He was big. For his size, he was big. And the same is true for the cheetah. You know, he is a very cut,
Hmm.
developed man. He's short, but he is stocky.
Yeah.
Whereas Hardy is far more wiry. He's very thin, very slight build. It's not that he doesn't work out; he just doesn't have the frame to
Hmm.
hold the muscle you need to take the punishment. That's why he got hurt so often when they would overuse him. Because yeah, Hardy, to me, in that playoff game, everybody talks about, I do too, about Cook fumbling the ball and fumbling that game away. But to me, the biggest loss in that game was Hardy getting knocked out early
Yep.
because the Bucks had no answer for him. They couldn't stop him. Every time
Nope.
he touched the ball, he was going to the house, and that was a touchdown. That was not a legal block. I don't care how
Thank
many
you.
times they
Yes.
show that. Yeah, that was a touchdown. But yeah, they had no answer for Hardy. He doesn't get hurt in that game. He is dominating. He gets that ball, not Cook early in the third quarter, and runs down the middle and outruns the entire defense.
Hmm.
Because if you just watch the first 5 minutes of that ball game, you just see what the special teams were doing. They were setting the Bucs special teams on fire. It was a dumpster fire, and they had no answer. And then he hurt his neck again. So yeah, my son's pushing Mac Hollins. That sounds a lot like Colston's stats: 6'4", 216. That's about how big Marcus Colston was. So yeah,
Yeah, you know
I,
what? If
you
they can
know,
get a Mac Hollins, and I've always liked Mac as a receiver, if they can get a Mac Hollins on a fairly reasonable deal, obviously he's familiar with Derek Carr and vice versa. Mac can be an X receiver. Mac can also line up in the slot. He has that. He has pretty good quickness for a guy his size. Uh, but again, you look at the free agent deals that most of these wide receivers got last year coming right out of the gate in free agency. The Saints aren't even going to look at a wide receiver for the first week in free agency, folks. They're just not, because of the money that's going to be thrown around. If for some reason Mac Hollins is still available 2-3 weeks into free agency, or a month into free agency, that's how the Saints got Jarvis Landry, folks. Jarvis Landry is one of those guys that nobody really wanted to throw big money to in free agency last year. That's why the only reason the Saints got him. So if Mac Hollins goes a few weeks into free agency, or another one of the big wide receivers that are going to be out there, then it's possible, but I wouldn't count on it.
The rumors Cardinals are going to DeAndre Hopkins. I really don't put much stock in that, because then you're tanking. And what are you tanking for exactly? Are you going to get rid of this quarterback that you paid all this money to? Is that what you're going to tank for? That doesn't make much sense to me. Now, if the Rams would want to unload Cooper Kupp, then maybe I'm looking at somebody like, yeah, I might go for that. Cooper Kupp's not an X receiver, by the way. He is a slot receiver. But I love that guy. I really do. I mean, it's beyond the fact original Saints grandson. I mean, Jake Kupp, original Saints player, offensive lineman, and guard, was his grandfather. But I just like Michael Thomas, I love the way he attacks that ball.
Yeah.
That is a special player. The way he plays the game. But so let's talk a little bit about the draft and at 29. Where do you think the Saints need to go at 29? Now that you've got Carr in the house, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they work out some deal with Thomas, because I'm like you, I don't see a receiver in the first round. What do you see in the first round at 29?
Well, I'll tell you, and you've said it yourself before. If there's one thing that we know about the Saints, It's that they do not go into, at least in the in Mickey Loomis era, and now that Jeff Ireland came on in 2016, especially since Jeff Ireland came on in 2016. There's one thing that we know about the Saints draft is that they don't go into a draft saying we have to draft this position at number 1 or this position at number 2. Yeah, they realize their team needs, but they stay pretty true to their draft board. I think we can all agree that you can cross quarterback off of the list in the first and second round for sure. Probably all of day 1, first round, and all of day 2. If Hendon Hooker slips somehow to the third round, we might see some movement there. Otherwise, no. I highly doubt it'll be a receiver in the first round, unless that TCU kid, that Quentin Johnson, falls, because he's that kind of big body playmaker. So I realize that the Saints need more offensive help than they do defensively, but maybe the biggest hole on their entire team, now the quarterback has been signed, is the defensive tackle position. There are 3 guys who I absolutely love at 29 if they're there. Cansey from Pitt, Ika, and forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong, Ika from Baylor, and Mazi Smith from Michigan. Now, Cansey is more of an undersized guy. He's an extremely explosive athlete, but he only goes about 280, 285. So, he has some good strength, but you wonder if he's going to get pushed around in the trenches and short yardage situations a little bit. The Baylor kid and the Michigan kid, they're 320, 330 pound range. They're going to be those plug and play guys with the pass rush potential to be effective on every single down. So if you're looking for defensive tackle, those are the areas to look at. Running back. You cannot overlook the running back spot in this draft. And I think that there'll be some free agent running back options that the Saints will take a look at. But I think the New Orleans Saints have to come out of this offseason with 2 running backs. And I say 2 because of the Kamara situation. You don't know. Let's assume he's going to be suspended for at least 6 games. Remember, guys, that's at least. So they need a versatile guy, a guy that could get out on the edges, a decent receiver out of the backfield. But they absolutely need a guy that's going to be an effective option between the tackles too. Bijan Robinson from Texas. Most of us think that he's going to be long gone by 29, which is a shame because I love the kid. If that's the case, what about Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama? Now, Gibbs is more of a Kamara type. Do you take a little bit of a reach at him at 29? Again, I think it depends on your draft board. If any of those other positions are available, defensive tackle specifically, you might wait because there's some other guys. Kenny McIntosh, Israel Abanikanda from Pitt. I love Chase Brown from Illinois. Those are all going to be day 2, mid to late day 2 products. But again, we've seen the Saints take a reach for a late day 2 guy. We've seen the Saints grab a guy, reach for a guy in the first round. That everybody else had a mid to late day 2 grade on. So if the Saints identify running back as a need, and one of those guys are at the top of their draft board, do not be surprised. 3 terrific tight ends are going to be in this draft, and I love Johnson, Jawan Johnson, but he's not a difference maker at tight end. If Dalton Kincaid from Utah, if he's there, everybody knows or everybody loves the kid from Notre Dame. You might see one of those 2 guys get drafted at tight end, believe it or not, folks, for the Saints with the number 1 draft pick. So, other than quarterback, I think, and probably cornerback, I think all bets are off as far as where the Saints are going to go in the first. Because that wouldn't even shock me if they went pass rusher or edge rusher. I wouldn't consider it at the top of the list of needs. And they just re-signed Passanio. Cam Jordan, despite what national reports would love to have you believe, Cam Jordan is not going to be a cap casualty. He's probably going to be restructured, but you have to get younger there too. So do not be shocked if a edge rusher that they love falls in that range. Maybe they go there.
You know, one of the things that I've been thinking about now that we have Derek Carr is, as Saints fans, you almost want a quarterback heavy draft in that first round. You want to have these teams are passing on taking a shot at Lamar Jackson and focusing on the draft. And you know what? Quarterback draft would mean that, okay, beyond Young and CJ Stroud, people are taking Anthony Richardson in the first round. They're taking the kid from Kentucky in the first round. They're taking Hendon Hooker in the first round. You know, if you can get 6 quarterbacks to go in that first round, that opens up the draft tremendously for the Saints. And you're looking at Robertson sliding. Then you're looking at the defensive tackles all sliding. Then you're looking at the tight ends all sliding, although I do think the Notre Dame tight end is probably going to go right about anywhere from 12 to 17, somewhere in that range he's going. But yeah, that is a good thing for Saints fans that, you know, all the quarterback needy teams take their quarterbacks in the first round because they want that 5th-year option, and they'll just go ahead and take it regardless of what's going on. That's the kind of stuff you want to see and now that you have Carr, and that's not to say that you're not going to be interested in a quarterback in this draft. There are other quarterbacks that you could take later on as projects because I want to get younger in the position. I want that shake up that room, and I'm going to bring in a guy, you know, maybe in the 4th round, you know, maybe in my 3rd round compensatory pick. I'm bringing in, I don't know, the kid from Houston. You know, I can't think of his name right now. I apologize, but I'm taking a shot on him. You know, but it's not imperative. If I don't get him, I'm all right because I know there's positions I need, and you touched on all of them: defensive tackle, guard, defensive end, edge rusher. Because Peyton Turner has turned out to be a bust so far, and I'm not hopeful that year 3 is suddenly the light's going to come on like it did for Ruiz. I just don't see that. You're probably not going to re-sign Marcus Two-First Davenport. You know, you're probably going to end up going with your backup ends on that side. I would not be surprised to see Peyton Turner and probably Carl Granderson splitting a lot of time opposite Cam Jordan this year. So, you know, there's things that, you know, you just don't have to take certain positions, but there are positions that are very deep in this draft that we need. And defensive tackle, offensive line, I still want to get other receivers, even though we talked about how you need a big physical receiver. We need a 4, you know, and the amount of injuries we've suffered, we definitely need 4 or 5 receiver. Because I do not want to go through another year with Traquan Smith on this roster. I just don't. I really don't.
You're preaching to the choir there.
Yeah, and you know, I don't want to have you know, be looking for an Austin Carr or someone like that. You know, I'd like to get a rookie, not a 7th round pick, but a receiver who can actually do something for this team. So there's the drive is you look at the draft to take best player available, but the best player available on your board, the stuff that the position that you value. And this is my argument. I'm sorry, I'm reading your comment, Ryan, and I know what you're saying here, but it becomes a reach because I think Peyton Turner was a reach. Peyton Turner was graded as a 3rd round prospect, and he was taken in the 1st round because he filled a need. but the problem is his talent level is not that great. So if you have your board, and your board should be listed as these are the top 100 players for position on the board. These, as far as talent, I have these 100 players rated as my best players. These I need as my. That's how you just take a guy second round or the first round, because they picked it off the top. It's all the players that you happen to need, but they've got this one guy who you had rated top 10 player, but he's that much better than everybody else that's left on your board. You take him. So you take a Deuce McAllister in 2001, even though you had Ricky Williams, who you gave up the entire draft for 2 years earlier, because Deuce McAllister should have been in the top 10. He should have gone in the top 10. He fell to you in the 20s. So you take that guy. And the worst thing can happen is you've got two talented running backs. Now, they couldn't coexist. That's why one of them had to go. But you had two talented running backs in that thing. So that's why you do that that's why you rate the board the way you do. And I'm okay with doing that as long as the player makes sense as far as talent. If Bryce Young tumbles all the way to 29, I'm taking Bryce Young in the first round. Even though I just signed Carr to this deal, that's a good example of that, because I have Bryce Young rated as a top 10 player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just how I see this. But second question, though, for you, Bob. The kid from Georgia, highly rated defensive tackle. It comes out during the combine that it turns out he was racing. He was involved in an accident that killed a teammate. He had lied to the police. How do you think this affects his draft status?
It could have a huge negative impact on his draft status. But I only say could have because we don't know how those interviews with him went at the combine, or if any teams had a chance to talk to him prior to that. The reason I say that is this: if I'm the general manager or coach that's interviewing him, that's going to be one of the first questions I ask. Now, we know that he withheld information from police, which is a form of a lie, certainly. If I ask him face to face and he tells that same lie to me, he is 100% off of my draft board. Because it's one thing to make a mistake. Yeah, and this is more than a mistake, folks. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it reaches a whole new level when it takes another human life. But people deserve a chance at redemption. That is right up there with the epitome of stupid mistakes, stupid life-changing mistakes. But you can come back from that. At least you hope you can. But if you lie about it, that shows me such a negative character defect that I don't want it anywhere near my locker room. So since we don't know how those individual interviews with he and teams, how that transpired, I still would expect him to be probably a top 10 or 12 pick. Now he was projected literally by everybody to be in the top 5. So I think at the very least this has slipped him a little bit. But I still think he'll go no later than middle of the first round. How do you feel?
I think that the fact that this story came out during combine and not the day before the draft is a huge difference for how far he's going to slide, because of the very things you just said. I think he is going to be able to go to these interviews, and granted, they're all coached in these interviews. I get that. They've learned not to give the Ryan Leaf answer that he gave in the interview that, what would you do if you found you didn't want overall pick? I'm going to Vegas with my buddies. Oh, that's a great answer. Great answer to tell your future employer.
I respect the honesty.
Whereas Peyton gave the typical coaches and former players' sons answer of I'm gonna get to know my teammates. I want to get a copy of the playbook. I want to do all the hard work stuff, which is what they want to hear. But I think he has the opportunity to clear his name long before the draft so that he can regain the momentum. Because unlike a guy like a Lawrence Phillips or I can't think of his name now, the Miami offensive tackle who got caught wearing the gas mask that he was doing a bong
Tunsil.
Smoke now. Yeah, Ole Miss. That stuff all came out the day of the draft or the day before the draft. And Lawrence Phillips clearly was the problem child. Everyone knew about this. And when Dick Vermeil gives up on you, you're done. I think he has a good way of fixing this. But teams are going to keep in mind Riggs from Alabama, some of these other players that I don't want to say Dante Stallworth because that happened much later in his career, but they're going to keep those kind of guys in mind where they're going to be like, you know what? He's done it once. He may do it again. It might be better if I stay away from him. So it's just, it's a tricky thing, but this is a defensive tackle. And I wanted to throw this in here too. Did you hear what Deion Sanders said about this? About his philosophy on taking players? Okay, he wasn't talking specifically about this Georgia player, but he had said that he wants his offensive players to come from a two-parent family with a loving family and stuff like that, but he wants his defensive players to come from a single-parent family because they got an attitude and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder and they're going to be mean and nasty, and that's the kind of player I want. I'm like, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But this is borderline Jimmy the Greek kind of stuff. When Jimmy the Greek was drunk and talking about breeding players.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't go there. Okay. You just, because it's not true. First off.
Right. And I don't think Deion was trying to be disrespectful, but every now and I do believe, I do think that Deion Sanders can be a very eloquent speaker. But every now and then, the NFL player Deion Sanders creeps his way back out. That's the personality that most people absolutely hated. Thought he was a punk, a thug, whatever other derogatory name you want to put on it. I think he was he was a big dumb kid at the time. But every now and then that big dumb kid still comes out because he does wear his feelings on his sleeve. I think that's why his players love him. So I don't think he was saying or meaning anything disrespectful by it. Clearly, and all coaches are like this. They look for certain characteristics from certain positions and from each side of the ball. But the way Deion incorporated family into it, I think he was probably trying to be humorous, but a dangerous game you're playing these days.
And this goes back to you think about Bountygate and you think about what the video the audio I should say that biographer for oh man, I'm drawing a blank on one's names tonight, Gleason, but the biographer who filmed that thing of Greg Williams talking about you strike the head and it kills the body and you go after the injured players and you want to test them to see how well they are after that. That works in the locker room because you're psyching yourself up. You know what they mean. When you're saying, I'm going to kill you, you're not literally going to kill that other player,
right?
But you're going to hurt them. and you're not trying to hurt them, but you want to get the message across that I'm going to go out there and I'm going to beat on you for 60 minutes.
Mhm.
And you hear this talk in the locker room, and it comes out of the locker room and out in the public arena. People read it very differently. So, yeah, I feel the same way. I know what Dion was saying. Dion wants to have guys who are loving and caring in his offense because he wants them to function as a unit, but he wants a mean and nasty defense. So I want that guy, that kid who's been the abused dog, who's been neglected and is pissed off at the world, because I want him to take it out on every opponent every week. You think about yourself here, but the movie Fast on Ridgemont High, Roosevelt, you know, Spicoli wrecks the Camaro, and his idea was, I'm going to spray paint the rival school's name all over this car. So Roosevelt comes out of that game pissed off and taking it out on the other team, and you win the game. So that's the part. The actor was who played Roosevelt in the movie Fast on Ridgemont High. It is Forrest Whitaker, a very young
No.
Forrest Whitaker
Wow.
plays Roosevelt. And because I watched the movie again not long ago, and I'm like, look at that. I said, look, I can't believe it's Forrest Whitaker. And yeah, him hurdling the offensive lineman and hitting the players, that guys are in convulsions on the field and stuff, that was just hilarious. Of course, you can't make a movie like that today because, it's one of those things that you can't make movies like these anymore. You can't make Animal House. You can't make these movies because the jokes just don't play well. So,
Nope.
But yeah, that is a funny scene. So yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I get what Dion is saying. You just can't say that in public because people aren't in the locker room. They're not used to that kind of that mentality. It doesn't. That's not how people should be. So, can you see the Saints doing any surprise moves at 29? Like take a position that we haven't talked about, or for the first time since Sean Payton's been gone, trade down from 29 and acquire more picks. Can you see anything like that happening?
I think the latter would be the more likely thing that we would see as far as surprises go, that they would trade down,
Mhm.
maybe 5-10 spots, and pick up more picks. Because again, if you do it smartly, we've both said that the Saints' positions of need, defensive tackle, running
Mhm.
back, especially it being the top two, but the Saints' biggest positions in need look to be the deepest positions in this draft. So if you could trade down 5 spots, trade yourself back out of the first round and in, within the first couple picks of the second round, pick up another second rounder or an early third rounder in the process, you have got yourself an extra immediate, at least in theory, immediate contributor. So I think that if we see any surprises, that would be the one that I would pick. Uh, a lot of people would consider it a surprise if the Saints went edge rusher or offensive line in the first round. While that's not my preference to see them go, it wouldn't shock me either, because I could see, depending on the value, depending on the player and the fit, I could see the logic behind either one of those moves. So I wouldn't necessarily consider an offensive lineman or an edge rusher a surprise pick per se.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think trading down would be a surprise, and I can only see them trading down if a team really wants to get that 5-year deal for a certain player, and let's just say one of those quarterbacks that someone really has an eye on, like a Colts team or a Falcons team or even the Carolina Panthers, that took another player to come back, get quarterback. Okay. Getting that play really went late in the draft. I think that would be later. Second, third round. I really don't understand what's going on with this internet. I'm going from strong signal to bad signal over and over and over again, and I don't know why. It's aggravating. It means I have to move my desk again somewhere in this room. Chad asks, do you see the Saints making any trades with Denver this year? I don't think Denver's
no, Chad, because Denver's got no draft picks left to trade.
Yeah.
The Saints are looking for help now. And if you think otherwise, then only look at the move that they did yesterday. Signing Derek Carr shows us that the Saints want to win now, that the Saints expect to win now. So you're not going to see any deals where the Saints give up a first or one of their first or their second round pick this year for high picks next year. That's just not going to happen. And Denver just doesn't have, they don't have a first round. They don't have a second rounder this year. I'd have to double check. I don't think they have even a third rounder this year. If they do, it's not a high one. So, for those of you that want to see more Saints land with Sean Payton and Denver, Taysom Hill, they don't have the draft capital to trade. You might see Denver and Sean Payton go after a couple of these Saints free agents, Caden Ellis, David Onyemata, Marcus Davenport, etc. But you're not going to see any draft day trades with the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. I take that back. You're not going to see day one or day two trades. All bets are off the table when you're talking 5th, 6th, 7th round draft picks. At this point, you're getting drunken guys saying, "I didn't know I had this many chips left. I'll throw it all on Red 68 and stuff like that."
Yep. Yeah. Free agent starts a week from tomorrow. You touched on a little bit, and we're going to talk a lot more about it next week. But obviously, Caden Ellis is a big guy that we want to get Brett back. Is there any other free agents that you think that the Saints have to re-sign?
Have to? No. But I'll tell you the one that I think that they will is David Onyemata. And here's the reason why. We know the defensive tackle is a need. Onyemata, Tuttle, and Kentavious Street are all free agents. Onyemata, Tuttle, and Kentavious Street all underperformed last year. But here's the thing about Onyemata. The Saints are going to pay. Onyemata is going to count for about $10 million against the team's salary cap in 2023, whether he plays for them or not. That's because, and we're going to see this a lot in the next couple of years, that's because Onyemata agreed to 2 or 3 restructures earlier in his career that kept pushing and adding voided years on. David Onyemata's projected contract through SpotTrack.com and OverTheCap.com has him coming in at about $9.5 million a year average. If that's the case, then if you're the Saints, you might as well throw David Onyemata a 2 or a 3 year deal worth about that annually, since you're gonna be paying him anyway, because it's going to take more than one defensive tackle to suit up for the Saints next year. And Onyemata, he did play better at the end of the year. Given the fact that the Saints are going to have to pay him whether he's on the roster or not, I do look for that to be one of the priorities as far as in-house free agents that this team goes after. I saw, I think it was you, John, that mentioned Juwan Johnson. The reason I don't mention Juwan Johnson as part of priority signing is, remember, Juwan is a restricted free agent, which means unless the Saints choose not to offer him a tender at all, which would be absolutely shocking, then the Saints are probably going to offer Juwan Johnson a second-round tender. Meaning that if another team offers him a contract, the Saints have a week to match it or get a second-round draft pick from that team. A second-round tender would not cost the team an arm and a leg as far as salary cap space. So, in my view, the Saints control the cards with Juwan Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree totally with that. And yeah, I agree with about Onyemata too, only because, like you said, you can be paying him anyway. I don't need to have another Jari Evans situation that we had back in 2014, where they released him, took a cap hit, and then brought him back with another contract. So he was getting paid. Well, he wouldn't get paid twice, but he counted twice on the cap. So yeah, we don't need another one of those things. Yeah, Avery says, I can't wait to see Loomis magic that we can get Derrick Henry to New Orleans. If we can figure out a way to get Derrick Henry to New Orleans, I think you will actually see a season ticket increase in that case among Saints fans, because I would hope he's more George Rogers and Earl Campbell, but he brings that kind of reputation. Playing in a dome, playing against these teams, and you're sending a Derrick Henry out to go pound on these defenses. Yeah. To wrap it up, what I see a lot of people saying not Marcus Spears. I'm sorry, I'm going back in time. Spears from Tulane. My only problem with Spears with Tulane, and it's only because you still have Kamara under contract. I don't see where he really fits in on this team unless you're drafting him to replace Kamara.
Right.
I like him a lot. I thought he had a very special Cotton Bowl game, but he is just so small and so thin. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but we need a big, stocky back right now to pair with Kamara. Spears, draft Spears, and you're sending a message that Kamara is on his way out. And that's possible. I'm not going to disagree. That's not impossible. But that's what you're getting. If you draft Spears, that's what you're signaling, that we're moving on from Kamara.
I mentioned earlier that I believe that the Saints have to come out of this offseason with 2 running backs. If you get a Spears, and if he's available in the 3rd round and you haven't already drafted a running back, I would take Spears at that point, but only if I manage to get a legitimate between the tackles guy, a Kareem Hunt or a Rashad Penny, or hell, I'd even take a Miles Sanders. If you get one of those guys in free agency, then you can afford to go after a Spears or a Kenny McIntosh, if either one of those guys are available in the 3rd round. Other than that, you definitely have to get a guy that's going to be a legitimate every down threat between the tackles first. That's got to be the first thing you check off at the running back position.
Yeah, and you're right, Brian. They have 3 backs in rotation, but remember, the 3rd back, Mike Bell, was supposed to be the pounder, the closer. Pierre Thomas was your inside runner. Reggie Bush was your outside runner with Bell coming in the second half with fresh legs as a closer. And I do like the idea of 3 backs in the rotation. And I think I would be surprised if the Saints don't try and do that again. Have 3 running backs and rotate them all, because I think that's what he wants. And I mean he by Dennis Allen.
I heard somewhere that Kamara was a pretty good receiver. lining up in the slot and even out wide as a wide receiver. I don't think anyone told Pete Carmichael that the last 2 years. So maybe if you do get those two backs, and whoever just said what they did about the UCLA kid, I like him a lot too. But anyway, if you do get yourself two backs and you're in a 3-back rotation, suddenly maybe you might be able to use Kamara at, I don't know, what he does best.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, crazy idea.
So I know I'm part of me is looking at, and I promise we're going to wrap up, but part of me looks at this thing as saying that Carmichael was only calling plays that he knew he could do with the personnel he had. But on the other hand, the total absence of Kamara in the passing game was inexcusable. So that's why I want the big back, and I like Zach Charbonnet a lot. He is my number 2 guy behind Robinson over there at Texas, because I want a big back with hands. Pass because I don't want, if it's anything I do not want this guy's your running guy, this guy's your passing receiving guy. So when this guy's in, they're going to run the ball. When this guy's in, they're going to pass the ball.
Right.
I want this guy could run or pass. This guy could run or pass, and I've got them both in the backfield. And this guy suddenly goes in motion. I got to change my defense. That's what I want to see. I want to see the mismatches. And I agree. They're talking about the suspension. We don't know that's going to be, but you're going to have at least, I'm expecting at least 4 to 6 games. Unless somehow he's found not guilty and all charges just dismissed. I can't see that happening. Fournette is the example of, this is your running guy, this is your pass receiving guy. I don't want that. That's why I don't want that. That's going to be an interesting topic because there are a lot. The guy I did like that he could have brought from the Raiders, they just franchise tagged Josh Jacobs. I would love to have Josh Jacobs. I'd like to get the tight end, Waller. I'd like to get Renfro, the receiver, as my number 4 receiver. There's a few guys I'd like to bring in from the Raiders. And I think Josh McDaniels is an utter buffoon, so he's the kind of idiot that would let these kind of guys go. So I thought he was a buffoon with Denver, and my opinion has not changed him going to the Raiders. Real quick, to get us out of here, what you have going on in the Bayou Blitz tomorrow? I know you guys were a day late last week, but what do you some people may have missed it on Wednesday and missed the announcement, but what do you have going on for tomorrow?
We're trying to get Jim Everett on with us because I want to pick his brain so bad about what kind of fit the Derek Carr is going to be in New Orleans. Jim and I are talking back and forth. He might be able to pop in for a little bit. Whether or not he does, Brendan and I are definitely going to preview free agency. I realize everybody wants to talk about draft right now, but remember, folks, free agency comes first. And Alan and I gave you a little bit of a peek tonight. We will do so more next week on Under the Dome. But Brendan and I are going to kind of kickstart that with a free agency preview. Who should be the in-house priorities? What order should they prioritize them? And what names or positions should we expect New Orleans to go after in free agency? And that will again give them some more flexibility in the draft. They're not going to be throwing around a lot of money in free agency, but expect the Saints to do what we've seen them do the last 4 or 5 years, is be very select in their free agency targets and have specific things or fits in mind for their free agency fits. And we're going to talk about that kind of thing. Absolutely.
That is something I was saving for next week's show, but the Saints do the bargain hunting. They're looking for the blue light special free agents because they do not want to spend a lot of money. But there were where they went out and got a Jarius Byrd, right out the gate. So they could surprise us, but I think this is the big name was who we got to yesterday.
Yeah.
Derek Carr. I think that's the big name free agent they're getting. I think a lot of these other guys they're going to be bringing in are going to be guys who are critical and important players on this team, but are not going to be guys you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we just got him. You know, we got the stud, because you think about Demario Davis when we signed him. Was that a big fanfare? No, it really wasn't.
No.
But
I loved
look
it
how
at the
big
time.
for him. I did too, because I remember watching that Jets game in 2017 going, I don't know who the hell this guy is. He is all over the damn field. I I couldn't believe it was like every tackle. Look, there he is again. So, yeah, there's quite we'll talk about the kind of guys the Saints should be looking at. Hunter Renfrow is the kind of guy they could be looking at.
Yep.
Because he's not going to be somebody who's going to command a lot of money, and he is a definite upgrade over Traquan Smith. What do you call him? Trashquan Smith. That's what it is. So, absolutely. All righty. Just tonight, as always, we run over because I shut up. But it's the first week I've had Bob back in about 3 weeks, so I got to pick his brain on a lot of stuff. Join him on a Bayou Blitz tomorrow night. Hopefully Jim Everett pops in. Great show, our sister show. I love to support him. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.